Hello everyone, and welcome to Pursuit's Winter 2024 release event. I'm Mike Vichik, Pursuit's co-founder and CEO. In today's release event, we're going to cover 4 major product updates, and then I'm going to talk with 2 of GovTech's brightest and best, Parth Shah, co-founder and CEO of Polimorphic, and Alex Peterson, co-founder and COO of Polco. I'm going to ask each of them about their experience in building a tech company serving government, and then dive into how their teams use Pursuit to grow revenue faster. Before we go there, I wanted to share why my co-founder, Brandon Max, and I founded Pursuit. Government plays a critical role in every American's daily life. When you send your kids to school, drive to work, or hop on a Teams meeting, receive medical care, or simply go for a walk in the park, you are interacting with something that was made possible by the government. Second, government is under immense pressure. I'll never forget a conversation I had with the mayor of a mid-sized city who said our costs grow 3x faster than our revenue. As a relative outsider, I found that super counterintuitive. Costs growing 3x faster than revenue? I tried to imagine a private sector company where that was true, and the only word that came to mind was unsustainable. I couldn't get that thought out of my mind, so I kept pulling on that thread. Why are costs escalating so quickly? It's a complicated answer, but one problem area that Pursuit is focused on in the near term is contracting. We've all heard the reasons why the 2nd Avenue subway costs $2.5 billion per mile to build, more than an equivalent project in Europe, or why the NASA Space Launch System is 6 years behind schedule and $6 billion over budget. But it's not just the massive projects that are challenged. Think about the $1.7 million San Francisco toilet that would take 2 to 3 years to build. Another tiny example is I know of an owner of a medical waste removal business who consistently charges his customers, who are firehouses and other public entities, 12x less than his competitors to remove sharps. The same quality and consistency, but for 12x less money. Critics of government will say this is caused by incompetence or corruption or both. They'll say that the problem is unsolvable. In our view, the problem is caused by incentives, and we think it is solvable. Here's what caused us to be in this position as we see it. Everyone wants to be spending public money well. So when there's an alleged misuse of public funds, there's rightfully an uproar. Citizens get upset. Electeds are pressured to act. To be seen as good stewards of public money, leaders create new rules to ensure that never happens again. Great. Well, that solves the problem then, right? Wrong. If you play that movie for 50 years, you're left with incredibly complicated purchasing processes. All these requirements, licenses, responsible contractor policies, the federal acquisition regulation or FAR, insurance requirements, onerous terms and conditions, complicated and lengthy invoice to cash cycles, RFP processes that are intended to ensure that government is well spent. But I mostly believe those items are well intentioned, but here's the irony. All of those rules guarantee that money is wasted because they reduce competition. They make it onerous for non-incumbents to participate in the market of government contracts. The rules that were meant to ensure public money was well spent actually act as a barrier to entry. You might be wondering, cui bono, or to whom is the benefit? 2 groups benefit from reduced competition. 1, the incumbent vendors and intermediaries who can charge high rates. And 2, people in government who think the status quo is preferable to the risk of trying something new. And again, it comes back to incentives. But here's the good news. Procurement rules for many units of government state that the lowest responsible bidder wins. In those areas, we can help vendors be deemed responsible and come up with the right price so that they win. This is a problem that software and AI can solve. For units of government who rely on best value instead of lowest responsible bidder, we can help those contractors understand what criteria are required to win, and then help those achieve those certifications in an ROI-based way. In other words, which certifications result in the highest ROI for the contractor. Again, that's a software and AI problem. If you list every reason why it's hard for a non-incumbent to win a government award, you know Pursuit's product roadmap. We're building software and AI-powered tools to make it easier for our customer, the government contractor, to grow. If we do that, we will have achieved our mission, make it easy to work with government. This is our life's work. We'll be here for decades to come. And now, let's change gears and focus on what's new in the Winter 2024 release. We have some awesome product updates to share. First up, let's talk about contact intelligence. Marketing and sales teams should be building and closing pipeline. Until now, one of the biggest time wasters for government go-to-market teams was making sure that their contact databases were up to date in their CRM. Not anymore. If you sell software to federal, SLED, or special districts, you can simply type your target roles, such as Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, or IT Administrator, or any other role title you want, into Pursuit. Within a second, you'll have your entire target list for all 90,000 units of government in the United States. You can then filter your targets from there by geography, targeting Texas, California, and Georgia, for example, or by population, targeting entities between 50,000 and 2 million people. Pursuit's data covers 90,000 units of government in the United States, extracts contact data deeper into their organizations than anyone else, and ensures that emails and phone data are the most up-to-date on the market. Using Pursuit puts you one step closer to making your numbers in the quarters ahead. Next up, let's talk about CRM integration. Another brutal pain point for government go-to-market teams, especially the sales and revenue ops folks, was making sure that contact data from their legacy data providers was correctly moved into their CRM. Screw this up and you have a proper nightmare on your hands. Duplicate contacts, duplicate government entities, conflicting data, woof. Good news though, that is now a solved problem. Pursuit's integrations with Salesforce and HubSpot allow teams to put their contact data on autopilot. To begin, tell Pursuit which personas you want to create, such as finance or human resources, IT or public works, or law enforcement, and so on. Second, tell us what authority levels you care about, such as decision maker, influencer, economic buyer, or user. We will push only the relevant data into your CRM. Then we will keep it in sync whenever there's an update to a relevant contact record. Pursuit makes it possible to put your contact data on autopilot so you can worry about more important problems. Next up, entity intelligence. Government sales cycles can be long and arduous. Multiple CEOs have told me that our best-selling reps are often our best project managers, not necessarily our most persuasive salespeople. Entity intelligence is designed to help sales teams shorten their sales cycles. How exactly do we do that? Pursuit tells you who to target, when, and about what. For example, suppose you sell content management systems or agenda management software or community engagement software. Pursuit reads the source code of every government website and within a second can tell you the tech stack for every Fed, SLED, or special district entity. For other clients, we have pulled bespoke data like the number of sworn police officers or the number of paid parking spaces. With Pursuit, your sales teams can say goodbye to spray and pray account prioritization and instead spend time with the entities who are most ready to buy. Finally, self-serve sign-up. We want to make it easy to work with government. It follows that we should be easy to do business with ourselves. If you're an individual sales rep or a go-to-market leader, you can sign up and start pulling contact data within minutes. Well, I am insanely pumped to be here with you, Parth. You're one of, I don't know if I've said this, but you're one of my all-time favorite founders, and I have immense respect and admiration for the work that you're doing for our country. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here. This is also the first ever client interview that we're doing for Pursuit. So appreciate you being the guinea pig and joining us. All right. But thanks for being here, man.
I appreciate it. No, that's exciting to hear. I didn't realize it's the first ever too. So that makes it cool. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's just get started for everyone's context out there. Tell us about Polimorphic's mission and how you got started.
Absolutely. Yeah. So at Polymorphic, our big focus is around making customer service easier for governments and in turn making it more delightful for their residents and businesses. And how we got started. So my family background, my grandfather worked in local government his whole career. And I started my career actually as a software engineer doing computer science, AI, machine learning. But then when I had a chance to work with this small company that was in the smart city space, I kind of jumped on it given that family background. And what I saw was there's all this talk around data analytics and things like that. But the number one problem that every local government faces is really customer service, right? They have too many phone calls, too many emails, too many resident calls coming in. And so we said, how can we help them manage that whole mess? And so that's what we do at Polymorphic.
Yeah, got it. And I would imagine that if you look back over the last 20 years, that the number of interactions that governments are having with their citizens they've got to gone through the roof, and they're probably more digital than ever, I'd imagine, right?
they've gone through the roof. They're more digital than ever. I also think what's interesting is the expectations are higher.
Yeah. Right.
When 20 years ago, you might have been okay with the fact that I submit something, I hear back in the mail 3 weeks later, and that's an okay interaction.
Right.
Today,
Right.
we're not. We expect kind of those status updates and
Yeah.
transparency, and so that's also changed as well. In addition, just the raw number increasing.
Yeah. 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 Really interesting. And I didn't know that about your family background. What's like an example customer story that you're most proud of so far?
Yeah, and I think the one I love is we work with this small borough in New Jersey, Prospect Park. And since then, the county they're in, which is Passaic County, is huge, has joined as well. But Prospect Park was the one we started with there. And they had this really funny example where in New Jersey, they don't call public records requests public records requests. They call them Oprah requests. And so it was just this very interesting example of like, if you really broke down the details of it, what happened when people would want to make a public records request, they go to the website, couldn't find it.
Ah, because
So
it was
they
just
call
different
in
words.
different words. They're different words. It's an old like keyword search, doesn't really work. So they'd call in front desk. Front desk would help them navigate to this PDF form online. You fill
Yep.
out the PDF, you'd had to cut a check. And then internally, they managed it all on paper because you actually got to produce those records. There's no
Right.
notification system, anything like that. And then 3 weeks later, you get this mailed document back or email like, hey,
Right.
here are the records. And we're really pumped about it because I love that example because what we've done is we started with this AI search tool. So now it's smart enough to know public records means Oprah request,
Yeah.
points them directly to a digital application. So you just fill out a digital web form. You can pay by credit card or ACH. And then
Amazing.
internally, they have this notification system. So it takes something that used to take 3 weeks into 3 days. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really cool example of every part of that process now looks like it's part of the 21st century.
And I'd have to imagine with that example that it just greatly reduces the amount of work that has to be done by the city and the number of things that they got to keep in the back of their mind. So especially at a time where there's a lot of vacancy, right? I imagine this brings a lot of leverage to their workflow every day.
100%. And I think that's something that a lot of city managers are kind of grappling with. They know that there's vacancy already. I think what's more concerning is it's only going to grow.
Right.
They have so many folks who are near retirement. They really can't attract that new talent in. So the question has now become, when over half your budget, and these are massive budgets we're talking about, are your staff, and the staff is kind of the thing you've been able to fill your gaps with.
Yeah.
When that doesn't exist anymore, where do you find efficiencies? And so that's really what we're focused on, is making sure that they can still provide that level of service, better service, with these kind of looming challenges.
Totally. That's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about. So, when you're a startup or a growing software company, one of the things you're trying to nail down is the product. You already talked about that. The other thing you got to nail down is your go-to-market. What's been the most challenging part about selling to government? I think everyone says like, oh, selling to government's so hard. The processes are complicated, they take a long time, but I'd love your view on that. What's the hardest part or parts?
I'd say so by far, like the number one biggest challenge I would say would be it's hard to break in. And that I think poses a very unique challenge because it's such a relationship and trust-based sale. And so when you're new, you're trying to build that up.
Right.
And I think for a lot of folks who come in, they expect that, hey, the best product is going to win. And it's not the case. And I think that's especially not the case in government. So that's one piece that makes it difficult. I think the other piece is timelines are a little tricky, right? Like governments, I think long term, they align with the value you offer. And something I've been thinking a lot about lately is just like how you align product pricing with the value you can provide. But in the short term, they have budget considerations. So it's a very weird buyer too, in that sense, which is unlike the private sector, they can usually long-term align whatever they're paying with the value they're receiving. But in the short term, you kind of have to work with them. Like their budget may get, set in June. Okay, well, you can't bill them until then, right?
Yeah.
You might be talking to them in January, but they're looking at June. So I think that timing stuff can often add these interesting wrenches, which is, it takes time in certain cases, longer than you'd like because it's on a set schedule.
Yeah, the process, like the mechanics of just landing a deal. If both
Right.
parties say like, yes, this is a good fit, the mechanics of actually getting that done seem substantially more challenging in the public sector than in private sector. Is that
Exactly.
okay?
I think that's
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
on the relationship side, what have you found works? So, like you talked about the example where you guys signed up Prospect Park and then the county around them,
Yeah.
signed up later. That implies, folks are talking and, you're able to
Yeah.
leverage the good work you do for one town for a neighboring town. How do you think about that?
And so this is what I would say is one of the benefits of selling to government, which is they're collaborative, right? They're not, if you sell to a private sector company, let's say I sold some tool to Brex, and then
Right.
Ramp
Try
is,
to sign up ramp. Yeah.
Brex doesn't want Ramp to know that, like, hey,
Yeah.
we're getting a competitive advantage out of this. Whereas with cities and counties and states, they want to share that.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of that conversation. The relationships really compound when, there's conferences, they have professional organizations. So when they start to present like, hey, here's something that's working for us,
Hmm.
uh, they are all struggling with the same challenges, right? Almost
Right.
all, no one's going to say that, hey, we wish we had more phone calls we couldn't get to, right?
Yeah,
We wish we
totally.
had
Right.
more paper processes that take time, right? So what really goes a long way is we try to over deliver on that first one and really show folks like what we can do. And we're fortunate to have in many states these champions who are like, hey, this is what we should be doing, and
Yeah.
they start to really share that with their neighbors.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then on kind of the technology infrastructure side for your go-to-market team,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I hope you don't mind. Like I think you publicly
yeah,
shared that you raised money,
right.
and you're starting to build out the go-to-market team and infrastructure.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about that. What does kind of like the tech stack look like? And if you could share what your go-to-market team that you're building, it looks like in your mind's eye.
Yeah. So the way we're kind of thinking about building out a go-to-market team, it's very regional, recognizing these relationships, and we want to be able to spend time in person with folks. So we have Southeast is a big region for us, kind of anchored by North Carolina, Great Lakes, Midwest, anchored by Wisconsin right now, Northeast anchored by New Jersey. And so the way we think about that is, having someone who's leading that region. And then as they
Yep.
grow, obviously, we can bring on more folks, and then they're paired up with someone on the client success side. And that's, I think, something unique we do, which is we really prioritize
Yeah.
someone who's going to actually be able to fulfill that level of customer service we historically have.
Yeah. So that's on the client success side. That's
That's
a
on the client
human,
success.
that's a polymorphic employed human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the go-to-market, there's a salesperson for those
Yep.
regions as well.
Yep.
Um, in terms of our tech stack, I'll start historically and then with Pursuit,
Yeah.
because I think that's probably the best way to put it. So historically, we used a few tools for us, what's really important is when we go to a conference, when we're in the area, let's say we're implementing with a client, there's really kind of three big campaigns, I guess, in government that people talk about, which is like, I'm at a conference, I'm in the area, we just
Yep.
launch with a client, like really simply, like that's what you
Yep.
do. And one of the hard parts historically would be we really only had a way of sharing those with city managers and maybe mayors in the council. But sometimes when we're working with folks, we're working with a certain department, and other
Right.
departments nearby want to hear about that. And so with Pursuit, I think that's been something we've been really excited about, is actually we're getting the ability to see like who is in which department, how we can get a hold of them as well. So that way when we work on a new project, we can share those case studies with relevant parties more easily.
And that goes kind of like further down the organization than like just
Yeah,
the head of finance, for instance, or
exactly.
of
Yeah.
public engagement. Yeah.
Right.
I want to go back to something you said a moment ago because I'm curious about it. So you talked about how Southeast was anchored by North Carolina, I think, and then Wisconsin in the Great Lakes region. What was
Mhm.
it about those areas that made them anchors? Like, was it just someone thought it was cool and was willing to take a risk? Like, what exactly was it that allowed you to get them as an anchor client?
Honestly, that was it. And as someone who's, I think, specifically, I'm actually happy to shout out the folks too for us, which is it was some really innovative clients in each region, right?
Yeah.
So Scott Attaway in North Carolina, Intishan in New Jersey, and then Andy in Wisconsin. All three of them have been they're unique clients. Like we really like hold them dear because they were the ones who were like, here's how I want the product to work. I
Right.
know this was before we had even building it, right? They're like,
Yeah.
I know this is what you're thinking, but here's how it should work.
Yeah.
And we're really
Amazing.
patient. Yeah, it was like this perfect balance of they're patient, like they get that, okay, this is something that's going to be a work in progress, but we're going to push you guys. Like,
Yeah.
this is what we think it can look like. Like, they're very ambitious in what they want out of the software,
Yeah.
right? And it's funny because, most customers, they're amazing and they're like, here's what it is in any space. But I'd say they're unique in that they really made it possible. Then once they start to see the stuff like, hey, this is really helping, like,
Yeah.
they're the first people to share it, right? They're like,
Yep.
look, this is huge. Everyone needs this. Let's get everyone on this in the region.
And it was trial and error for you to find those people. Just took time. You had to talk
Yeah,
to 1,000 people, and you find a small
you
percentage of
find
those.
one. Yeah, and we're lucky that we had a chance with them, and we're looking for more in different states, right?
Yeah.
So it's always kind of a work in progress there.
Yeah. When you think back at that, is there anything about those cities or those local governments, or was it like something that you could have observed from the data?
Mm.
Like, could you have gone, like, if you had perfect information, do you think you could have like looked at who else they contracted with, or was there any marker that might have informed that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing was each of them where they're all very different as individuals, right?
Yeah.
So, like, Incheon's one of the youngest borough managers.
Okay.
Andy's well known in Wisconsin. He's done like amazing work. But I think the thing that ties them all together is they're actually very small. They're all in small municipalities.
Okay.
And I think if we had coupled that with the fact that they're seeing growth or they're trying to, achieve efficiencies for some reason,
Hmm.
against the fact that for other software they'd used, they had always been the first adopter or one of the first adopters in their state. So
Okay.
they did a historical pattern of this, right?
Love
It's
that.
not something like that's the best way you can tell that they're
Yeah.
innovative, right? They've always wanted to be the first.
So it's
Um,
a few things. If I summarize, it sounds like in your case at least, and I don't know if this is like all of the cases, but it was a small growing community. Sounds like, is that right?
exactly.
Okay. Maybe a young person, leading that department or that community, and probably most telling, they were the first to pioneer XYZ other things in the future or in the past, rather.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
love
it's
that. And that data exists. And I think like that's one
right.
of the core things that we hope to be able to, share with Pursuit is, either, like you're describing, it takes a long time to do trial and error and meet these people over the course of 2 years. Meanwhile, you had to raise money, you had to cut payroll, that cycle time matters, from your perspective.
Oh
So if we
yeah.
can help you shorten that cycle time, huge, right?
It's huge.
Yeah,
And
and
then
then the other option, so you can either take
right.
a while and figure it out yourself, or you can hire a sales rep who like knows a region or a state, and they know so and so is the progressive person who does all the new innovative stuff. But you got to
Mhm.
hire that person, and that costs money. They may or may not actually know what they're talking about, so there's risk and time there too. So it's just
Yeah.
the data exists, and I think that's one of the things that we're hoping to unlock is just to make that broadly applicable. I know you know that, but that's what we're at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think the other piece of that too, which is that's just the beginning, right? Like when you get your first, I'm talking about
Right,
like three of our, we're around 40 customers now. So like, what do the other ones look like? And I think the
right,
point is like once you have that too, that's still not enough because
right.
now you need to say like who looks similar to them, right?
Totally.
You have it's like early, what's it called? The innovators, early adopters,
Yeah,
early
yeah, yeah.
adopters.
I was
Like
thinking about that same
exactly
term.
like that. Like, so how do you get there then? And so
Right.
I think the data applies to that whole cycle, like regardless of
Yep.
what stage you're in. I think
Yep.
that's what drew us to Pursuit, frankly. And we've talked about that at length, of course.
Yeah. I love that. Thanks for sharing. So, a couple other questions. When you think about the kind of the go-to-market machine that you're building, what holes, and maybe we just covered one of them, but like, are there any other holes that you think Pursuit filled?
I would say another one that's been kind of useful for us is when we start to engage with a city, sometimes they know one of the common conversations. So we work with the city manager most often because
Yeah.
we're usually doing our software is unique in that almost every department can leverage it. It's used for
Yep.
internal processes, public facing processes. So we fill the gaps where they kind of don't have software.
Yep.
That's also a tricky prospect
Totally.
because now I got to think about if I'm like one, who do you sell to? And usually it's a city manager because they're like, look, I have purview over a whole organization. I'm thinking about organization-wide efficiency I want to bring.
Yep.
I think you add on to that, what happens in a lot of conversations, they'll say like, look, I see the value for this. I have a few department heads that come to mind,
Yeah.
but what really would make it compelling for them is, hey, I know if you've reached out to 5 other departments and got some interest from them and see that there's value, then I can run a project where we can start with a few departments and then really expand over time, right?
Right. Yep.
So that's actually a big hole that's helped us fill because you don't want to manually go out and collect all that. And you don't
Yeah.
also want to put the pressure on or just the effort on the city manager of like, which department should we reach out to? Like,
Right.
can you get us their contact info? It's on the website, but like doing that for every single one you
Yeah.
do
It's
gets
painstaking.
it's
Yeah.
painstaking. And other lists out there, other services out there that offer kind of, how can you get in touch with these folks? Contact information. They don't
Yep.
have that for that depth, right? And
Totally.
that's what I hinted at earlier. And so that's
Yeah.
been a big hole it's filled too.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. The way we try to think about our job as it relates to contacts is we want to win on breadth. So not just states, not just municipalities, not just counties, but special districts, higher
Mhm.
ed, at K through 12, right? Like we can cover all those. We can go deeper in the org. And then I think one thing that'll be cool as time plays on, it's not as relevant yet because we're so new, but as time rolls on, something that you talked about before of like, okay, we signed up Racine, Wisconsin. Who else is like in the orbit of the team there, right? And if you were able to say, like, give me 1 degree, and this is what you're talking about, lookalikes, give me 1 degree removed from people who work at Racine, but are like in some other local
Yeah.
government role. Now you know who exactly like to reference when you're reaching out or who to ask for an intro. So I think that's, building that network, I think is a really key part of it.
Yep.
One question I have for you, it's kind of helps me learn as much about the market and what our customers want as
Yeah.
anything. But if you had a magic wand over the next 12 months and we could solve any go-to-market problem, what
Mhm.
what would you choose? What comes to mind? Helping you grow the fastest. Like what do you think would help you grow the fastest?
So I think it's a combination of things, but it boils down to right now we're in this interesting phase of we have a really neat, compelling free product we've been moving. And that helps us introduce folks to the Poly ecosystem. So the question with that one really is, how do we bring that to folks quickly?
Right. Is that a self sign up thing? What's the like can they go to the website and just go through a sign up form or sign up form?
Yeah, there's a little like sign up form, and then you spend 15 minutes with our client success team who can walk you through on how to add it to the website. So it's really straightforward. And then
Got it.
before we set up the call with you, we even have it all pre-set up. So
Yeah.
it's the AI search tool I kind of mentioned Prospect Park had. So
Yep.
answers all the questions, things like that. Um, what is key there though is we've now started to see a ton of traction in these states, and we're now starting to do like those marketing case studies on it. I think like the biggest thing for us to solve there would be like how the magic wand would be like, who is a lot of folks are really excited about AI. They're
Yeah.
they're thought leaders, but they might not be the same roles always. And so,
Right.
we've been able to plug in with a few communities being, innovators, but it'd be neat to see like,
Hmm.
hey, who's been posting, talking about AI?
Yeah.
Who's been bringing that up? Who's excited about it? With a magic wand, if we could wave that and just know that, I mean, that would be huge.
Where do you think those people are posting? Is it like LinkedIn or some
LinkedIn.
government forums? Like, is that where is that happening?
Mostly LinkedIn, but government forums is a great example too. Like who's hosting talks. Sometimes they write articles or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Council meetings, maybe they brought it up, right? Like which councils are talking about
Totally.
it, which ones aren't.
Yep.
Just helps you know like who's ready, who's excited about it.
Totally.
Because
Right.
there's three categories of folks. There's like the early adopters who I think they're coming to Polymorphic because like we're probably doing the most stuff in generative AI right now with that, client segment.
Yeah.
They're coming anyways. Like they're excited about it. But the early majority is one we're excited about, which is these folks who honestly the way I describe it is like they want to use AI, they have some concerns, but they don't
Right.
know where to start. Like that's a group that, when we get in touch with them, they're like, this is amazing. This is the easiest way
Yeah.
for us. Or it's low risk, great, but scaling that up would be huge for us.
Got it. Yeah. So my summary there is like helping companies understand where the intersection of like their product
Yeah,
and the interests of the people, not just the roles in the departments, because that doesn't always tell you the perfect answer, but people's
right.
interests. What are they posting about? What are they talking about? That sort of stuff would be useful too. So great.
Mhm.
Really appreciate it, man. Well, this is the first of hopefully many, and
Yeah.
again, couldn't be more thrilled to have you as a friend and as a partner. So thanks for joining us this early in the journey. Hey, everybody. With me now is Alex Peterson, co-founder and COO of Polco, one of my first friends in the GovTech industry. So we appreciate all the help and thought partnership that you and your team at Polco have provided, Alex. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
So before, I guess, to get us started, why don't you share for the audience, what is Polco's mission? How'd you get started and where are you headed as a company?
Yeah, good question. So our mission is twofold. The first is to bring communities together on their most important issues. And the second is to use the data that comes from that communication to help drive better outcomes at local and state government levels. So we got started almost 8 years ago now, and we started pretty narrowly providing a community engagement platform to local governments. And since then, that's expanded. The engagement side itself has grown quite a bit to include statistically sampled engagement, but also a whole bunch of other data. So really what Polco's emerged as, hopefully, is kind of a data partner in governance. And so we've grown from just local governments to include county, state agencies, school districts, and really thinking about government, GovTech, and the public sector kind of as broad as we can.
Love that. And giving, the power back to the people, so to speak, so that they can help shape and
Right.
prioritize issues. Maybe could you give us like an example or two of a particular client engagement that you think is representative and tells a good story about the possibilities that Polco can deliver?
Yeah, it's a great question. And people ask us this a lot. We see a lot of diverse uses. There's certainly some that show up more frequently than others, but it really covers everything. It could be as small as designing the new logo for a water tower, to as large as crafting a strategic plan. Pinellas County, where Tampa is located, just used Polco to basically build an entire data-driven organization out of the county. So they're informing everything from county staff programs to the long-run strategic plan for the county, and then everything in between. Right, we see
Yeah,
downtown revitalization efforts, tax questions, bike path design,
got it.
anything that would benefit from people or data. Someone's found out a way to use Pogo for it, so it's pretty
I
cool.
love that. So it's both figuring out what initiatives matter and what initiatives people want their governments to focus on, and then on a specific issue, which could be a bike path or anything. It could be just trying to make sure they understand what their citizens want. Um,
Yeah, we try to think of it as all of these decisions exist kind of in this decision life cycle or a policy life cycle. And so it starts
Yeah.
with understanding where the areas to improve are and how you're doing on those, all the way through, ideating on what could be improved and how you could do it. And then
Yeah.
the brass tacks of what does this bike path look like, right? If the issue is mobility or something like that.
Cool. Love that. That's cool because you can work with a lot of different departments within a given government.
That's right.
So I think you've been working in GovTech now for 8 years or so. I'd love to hear your take. What's stayed the same and what's changed?
Yeah, good question. A lot has stayed the same. I think that there are, at any given time, kind of a finite number of issues and things that local and state governments are dealing with. Those have increased, I think, over the last few years, especially with COVID and some of the public health and economic
Right.
development issues that came with that. But broadly speaking, there's at any given time maybe a dozen, 2 dozen issues that every government is either dealing with now or is likely to deal with in the next couple of years. That's remained pretty constant. I
Yep.
think one thing that we've noticed is the willingness to just work with younger and smaller companies is changing pretty considerably.
Hmm.
I think part of the reason is there's just more of those smaller companies now. And I think when initially was the case, maybe there was some skepticism about working with smaller companies or smaller products and technologies. But as the number has increased, and I think as they've proven out to be very valuable in the initial communities that they were adopted in, everyone just kind of got more comfortable with it. And then you'd see International City Managers Association starting to partner with some of these companies, which further added credibility. And so now
Yeah.
I think there's a really nice, healthy ecosystem where you've still got the big players, the GovTech companies that have been around for decades,
Yep.
but you've also got a really nice, healthy world of younger companies at various stages that are being used across the country and the world.
Yeah. Do you think, just to follow up on that, do you think that has to do with there's more SaaS companies now than before? Like, I guess when on-prem was more of a thing, probably was a constraint, right? Because there's more support and maintenance and stuff you got to do. But with a SaaS company, do you think that was part of this willingness to have more younger tech partners, or was it something different from that?
I think that was a necessary condition. I think what also helped was an increasing number of companies specifically looking to help governments.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cases, there's a lot of off-the-shelf private technology that was SaaS, but maybe something about the dynamic of it, the
Yeah.
privacy, the records, it wasn't quite right for government. But then
Right.
when a GovTech version of that product came, it suddenly was really valuable to
Yeah.
government. So both those things, I think.
So on the growth side for you guys at Polco, from your perspective, what have been some of the hardest challenges, or even speak more recently, what's been the hardest thing about selling into government for you guys?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is just how busy and short-staffed most governments are, right? They're juggling
Yep.
budgets and public meetings and planning and hiring at the staff level.
Right.
And it's still, I think, in many ways, a very in-person career path, whether with your residents or within the city staff, for example. And that makes it tricky, right? I mean, we're all busy, but I think local government staff and elected leaders are particularly busy. And so that means that in order to find time with someone, not just in a day, but
Yeah.
the right time for them in whatever cycle they're in, if they're at the right part of their budget or the right part of their strategic planning, having all of those stars kind of line up is really tricky. And I think you see the reverse of that at conferences, right? Where they're always amazing to actually sit down and understand what someone needs. And I think you can
Yeah.
make a lot of progress in finding opportunities to deliver value in those really dedicated environments where all of the day-to-day stuff is at least temporarily removed.
Yeah, for sure. And you talked, I know in the past when we've spoken, you've said, different from the private sector, obviously governments have a lot of information that is publicly available. When their fiscal year ends, probably when they're going to be budgeting, what's in their strategic plan, what's in their budget. I'd love to hear your perspective, if given that all that data exists, and that people are busy, that means you have to be targeted in who you're talking to. What's some, and I know you can't go super deep into it, but like if you could share a little bit of the machinery that you guys have built on the sales and marketing side to make sure that you're
Yeah.
talking to the right person at the right time. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you said it at the end. That's our goal is to make sure that we're reaching out to the right person, talking to the right person who has the right need at the right time. It doesn't do us any good if we're bothering someone because the timing isn't right. It doesn't do them any good either. And so
Yeah.
I think the real objective should be how do we use all this information that's available to make sure that we're doing that.
Yeah.
The challenge is that as much information that is publicly available, there's also a lot that's really siloed. Either it exists in a region or by state, or maybe not even that. Maybe it's only at the local level. And so while you could go find this out, to do it across the whole market would be really challenging.
Yeah.
But it's still a worthwhile effort to do because it's so unique, I think, to be in the public sector where the universe is very well known.
Yeah.
And you just don't have that in the private sector. So it brings a really interesting dynamic, I think, to the go-to-market process.
Yeah, and in terms of some of your tech stack that you guys have built out, um, talk to me a little bit about that. I know you guys have
Yeah,
you've had a lot of different things that you've done there. What are some that stand
yeah.
out to you?
So what we've tried to do is we really recognize the value of the network that exists, especially at the local level.
Yeah,
And there's oftentimes, regional, formal regional partnerships or even informal ones where city managers in a similar region all know each other. Maybe they work together on certain things.
right,
And from our experience, oftentimes they're facing similar issues around the same time. And so
right.
if we are successful, we have a great case study in one area, it's helpful for us then to kind of look immediately around that area first.
Yep,
Not to the exclusion of everything else, but kind of thinking about things
right.
geographically is really helpful. And so the systems that we've built internally are letting us kind of do that at scale, right? And making it really easy to say, hey, there was an incredible parks and recreation use case in this particular area. We know that there's a larger regional effort to improve parks. How can we find out exactly who needs more data and better resident engagement on parks in the
Yeah,
20 or 30 jurisdictions that surround this area? So making that kind of fast and easy for our team has been the focus.
definitely. And trying to, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but maybe centralize some of that stuff so each individual sales rep that you have doesn't have to be doing a lot of that work over and over again. You can just kind of give it to them at scale. Maybe that's a good segue into what holes did Pursuit fill for you guys? What drew you to it?
Yeah, I think the thing that was most attractive was the time saving from needing to go find ultimately who the right person is.
Yeah,
And it's often really complicated. For us, when we first started, we were most of our buyers were city managers, but that's increasingly become much more complex. We're working with finance directors and parks and rec,
right.
economic development, local government, HR, human resources. And so now we're thinking about all these different types of people and all these different organizations, and to figure out who the right person
Yeah,
is a huge lift for the team, right? And so if we can take our geographic view of the world and very easily say, hey, we think that we can deliver the most value for this municipality, now we can very quickly figure out who is the right person to talk to, exploring a way to work together.
and how do you think about level in the organization or in the government entity? Like, obviously, to your point about people being busy, like, I'm sure the folks at the top are very busy, right? So, like, trying to get a hold of a city manager, probably pretty hard. But as you go down the organization, you might have more time. They might have the ability to take meetings, but lacking the decision authority, maybe. How do you think about level of the organization when when you're trying to reach out to people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it varies. It varies probably by the size of the locality, or at least the size of the staff, for sure.
Yeah,
And it also, I think, is maybe culturally different, maybe legislatively different, depending on where it is. But sometimes it is a city manager. Sometimes those decisions are delegated down or across or
yeah,
over. Honestly, I view our responsibility as a vendor to governments is to figure that out ahead of time so that we're not bothering the wrong person, right? We can go straight to the person who has the need and the decision-making power as
Right.
quickly as possible.
Yeah. So if you think about like magic wand, I'll give you a free magic wand. Any wish can come true. If there was one
Yeah.
thing that would most help the Polco go-to-market effort, and and I don't know, it could be anywhere in that whole cycle of like finding the right target clients to knowing what's relevant to them at the time. What data would be most helpful to you?
Yeah, I think it would be knowing what the pain point of today is for any given organization, because it could be any one of 20 or 30 different things.
Yeah.
And for us, at least, we can't be everything to everyone, but probably for 2/3 of those, there's a lot of value that we can deliver.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to know before the fact. It is
Right.
for this city, it is all about recycling. It's all about taxes. It's about the budget process that's been contentious. It's about a
Yep.
saltwater treatment plant that's been in the works for 5 years. If we
Totally.
knew that, I think it would be much easier for us to be able to explain what we do in a way that could make someone understand how.
Yeah, be relevant and timely, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Well, more to come on that one. I think, we've spent
Yeah,
some time building out our contacts product. An area of focus for Pursuit in the next quarter or two will definitely be on the entity side, and we're already starting to do some stuff there, but that's really exciting and good to know that it's aligned. But anyways, I really appreciate you joining, Alex, and I look forward to a long partnership with you and with Polco, man.
likewise. Yeah, thanks, Mike.
In closing, our mission is to make it easy to work with government. We believe that if it were easy to win government business, there would be more competition. More competition would result in better outcomes and prices for the taxpayer. Having said that, we need to acknowledge the reality of where we are today. Deficits are large. Interest on the national debt is increasing rapidly. And while it would be easy to cast a negative shadow on our country's financial future, we are optimistic. We are optimistic that AI will unleash a new level of competition and productivity for the public sector and for those who serve it. Thanks for joining Pursuit's Winter 2024 release event. We'll see you back here in May for our spring release. Thanks for joining.